Another legal challenge is on the horizon for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. A state lawmaker is expected to file a lawsuit soon in an attempt to block future migrant flights. Florida Senator Jason Pizzo says DeSantis violated state law when he flew 50 migrants to Martha's Vineyard, Massachusetts, from San Antonio, Texas last week. The governor has tried to justify the flight by pointing to a provision in a state budget that sets aside funds to transport people unlawfully present in the U.S. That only applies if you're transporting people in Florida, not Texas. And when asked about this, DeSantis noted that the plane stopped in Florida before continuing on to Massachusetts, a move Democrats believe he made in an attempt to create a legal basis for the flights. An attorney representing more than 30 of the migrants in a class action suit says his clients are now receiving hate messages and death threats.
With me now, CNN political commentators S.E. Cupp and Ana Navarro, and the president of Bienvenido, Abraham Enriquez. Anna, let me just start with you. In the news of this lawsuit out of Florida, what do you make of that?
Look, this entire situation hits me in several ways, right? First of all, I'm a Florida taxpayer, and I find it outrageous that over $1 million now have been paid to a Republican donor company, flight charter company, for this political stunt, when there are so many needs in Florida, when there are teachers that are so highly underpaid that we have a teacher shortage. It is outrageous. I'm also a refugee. I fled Nicaragua. And most of those people fleeing Venezuela, Nicaragua, are fleeing. Let's remember why. Because there are horrible dictators in those countries that violate human rights, and they are fleeing those countries seeking freedom, making a treacherous trek, including through Panama and the Darien Forest, to make it to the United States. That is what asylum law allows them to do. If we don't like that, then let us change that. And I find it despicable that in a state where so many people have the same experience, Ron DeSantis is using this right now as a political stunt to get his base out there for just before an election. There's so many other stories he could be telling. There's so many economic stories he could be telling. This is unnecessary, again, an unnecessary culture war. And I think transporting undocumented aliens across state lines and violating state law, because they didn't need to stop in Florida. Who goes from Texas to Florida to Martha's Vineyard? I mean, that just makes absolutely no sense, and it is a transparent attempt to not violate what the law stipulates.
Abraham, what do you say to that?
Well, good morning, John, and good morning to everyone. Listen, I want to first start off by saying that as a first-generation Mexican-American, I'm very sympathetic to what's going on at the border and the lives of the migrants. As Anna mentioned, just coming to our U.S. border is a miracle within itself if they survive to make it to our U.S. border. However, this talk of a lawsuit really, to me, sounds like election year political theater. Look, what the governor did was offer transportation for migrants who were homeless and needed refuge. And it was voluntary basis, right? The governor's office has released the waivers both in English and in Spanish. But the frustration that we're hearing from people in Texas, specifically South Texas, is how the media is making this a big deal just because it comes from a wealthy city like Martha's Vineyard, when hardly no conversations being had of Tucson, Arizona, El Paso, Brownsville, Harlingen, Eagle Pass, which, by the way, we don't get 50 migrants a day, we get thousands. So what we're talking about and what we're saying is it's easy to have empathetic values or insights to open border and weak border policies if you live in the Upper East Side of Manhattan or Malibu. But these are our communities and these are our resources that are being strained. And all we're asking for is for other states, which, by the way, have sanctuary city laws, to start picking up their weight in this crisis that we have caused by the lack of attention from our president.
Frankly, Abraham, I don't know how you as a Mexican-American, and I don't know how you can, with a straight face, say that what the governor was simply offering was transportation. Please don't be so cynical. It's a little early in the morning. You know damn well that it was much more than that. Yes, he's trying to bring attention to the crisis on the border, and he's trying to do it through a political stunt by sending these to blue states, blue cities. Let's call it what it is. It is a political stunt. And please don't use your Hispanic last name to come on here and try to, justify this as just offering transportation. If it had been offering transportation, it didn't need to go to a Republican donor. He didn't need to pay more than 3-4 times the amount that it would have cost. He could have simply called the Office of Refugee Resettlement There are actual organizations in the United States that do this and are funded to do this without this type of thing. The one who wants the media attention is Ron DeSantis.
Abraham?
So I actually spend a lot of time in our southern border, and I invite you to come down and celebrate National
been
Hispanic
there.
Heritage Month down there. You'll probably see all of the Hispanic heritage celebrated there. And so that's why I'm saying that what we're seeing in our southern border is lack of attention. Our Border Patrol agents are overworked. There is no federal resources that are even trickling down to our border. So in order for us to say that flying migrants who were homeless, Anna, who had no food, who had no shelter, to a city in a sanctuary state that has more than enough resources is bad, to me, that is complicit to what's going on.
They were
and
tricked.
quite honestly,
They were
Anna,
tricked
you
by
can
a
be a
woman named-
Republican by conviction, or you can be a Republican by convenience, and I choose to act on a conviction.
Let me let Essie get in here. Essie?
Listen, I think two things can be true. One is that this is an entirely political and cruel stunt, and for a lot of reasons, the cruelty is the point. There's another story yesterday in the Miami Herald of a woman allegedly tied to Ron DeSantis, rounding up some migrants in Texas, promising them a flight to Delaware where they would have a job and a house. And that flight didn't exist. It was meant to punk journalists into thinking that a flight was going to Joe Biden's summer house. That is appalling. But another thing can be true, which is that sanctuary city policies are unsustainable. Sanctuary city policies are not a long-term immigration solution. And neither party has decided to solve our broken immigration system. It has remained politically profitable to leave it broken, because on both sides, if it's broken, you can run on it, you can fundraise off of it, and you can fearmonger off of it. There's a reason we haven't solved it. It's not that we can't. We haven't had meaningful immigration policy since Ronald Reagan. The reason is political, and I'm glad we're all finally having these conversations. I hate the reason that we're having them and the stunt that was pulled for us to have them, but these are important conversations for both parties to finally start engaging in.
Anna?
Look, what these migrants are saying, what has been documented, is that they were tricked by a woman, so-called Perla, who offered them all sorts of things that were not true. And so these migrants, they're coming from places like Venezuela, like Nicaragua. They're signing papers, they don't know what they are signing. That is called duping, okay? That is not legal. And transporting them across state lines without a full consent and understanding of what is happening, it is absolutely unconscionable and indefensible.
Essie, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
Because you brought up the broader discussion. You brought
Yeah.
up Reagan. I mean, during the George W. Bush administration, there were serious negotiations. They all
Yes.
broke down. They fell apart because at that point it was the Republican House where
Yes.
it all died. But what is the discussion? In the SE Cup world of
Yes.
let's get real about this, what would you be talking
If you
about?
look at polling, and this is how I know it's broken intentionally, because if you look at polling, undocumented immigrants and migrants have a priority, which is legal status. It's not citizenship. They want to stay, live out of the shadows, work, and maybe return home one day. What do we keep fighting about? Citizenship. Why? Because it's the wedge. It's the reason we can keep fighting instead of solving a problem. If both parties could come together on the lesser issue, the legal status issue, we might actually solve a problem for undocumented immigrants instead of just kicking this can continually down the road. And look, both parties have tried. The Obama administration had DACA. That was a temporary Band-Aid solution that sunsetted, that expired, and now is left for someone else to kind of figure out. And the people on the receiving end of this, the people who get the brunt of this, are migrants, asylum seekers, undocumented immigrants, and legal immigrants. They are the ones put in the crosshairs of this, and they're the disadvantaged ones from this broken system that we refuse to fix.
The big problem, John, is that right now, if you get to the border, you are allowed to seek asylum.
Mm-hmm.
And so the border then becomes a magnet. And I think we need to figure out a way so that people can ask for asylum, can petition for asylum, can try to process asylum, not on the border, but in other countries along the way, so that at the same time, they don't have to make this treacherous trek. They don't have to be paying coyotes. They don't have to subject themselves to the threat of sexual assault and sexual, and rape on the part of the women. There's so many other things, dying of heat. Mm-hmm. And so we need to figure, but for that to happen, the law needs to change. The current law allows them to get to the border and apply for asylum.
Of course, the complication is Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela. really no
The
diplomatic
complication
relations.
is,
Yeah,
listen,
to make it
Ricardo
work.
Maduro, Daniel Ortega, and the remnants of the Castro regime that people are fleeing in desperate manners.
Abraham, what do you think of this type of discussion about possible solutions?
Well, John, where my heart goes out truly is I think of my grandparents who are pastors in Mexico. And occasionally they get families of migrants that are going through Mexico and stop at the church and share their stories. And looking at all the minors, unaccompanied minors are crossing our border as well. And I can't just fathom to think of the migrants that didn't make it to our border. My heart goes out for them. My heart also goes out to Alejandro y Fernando, who suffocated in a trailer being smuggled across our border in hopes of finding a better life out here. My heart also goes out to the 6 LA students that overdosed of fentanyl in LA just the other day, as well as a 15-year-old girl that overdosed with fentanyl just yesterday, a drug that's being trafficked across our border because of our failed weak border policies. Look, John, if we were to take 30 seconds to acknowledge and to recognize all the lives that have been negatively impacted because of our weak border policies that we have today, a year wouldn't be enough.
All right, S.E. Cupp, Ana Navarro, Abraham Enriquez, thank you all for the discussion.
Thank you.